Good morning and welcome. You are listening live to Heart-to-Heart, a program which aims to help you understand and to become your loving self. I'm Dr. Mitra Rashidian. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sexologist in private practice, beautiful Encino, California. And I'm here today, this morning, with Dr. Robert Jaffe, an amazing person that everybody needs to get to know.
Oh, what a great introduction. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So, yes, I'm Dr. Robert Jaffe.
Yes, you are.
I am. In this lifetime, that's who I am. And I am many things, among which I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I also am a certified hypnotherapist, love doing hypnosis with people. And maybe one day we'll just talk about that, about hypnosis.
Yes, it's interesting that we have that specialty, but we barely mention that.
Yeah, we don't really talk about
Right.
that, but we can and we will.
Yes, the science of hypnosis.
The science of, well, the art science.
Art
It's
science.
an art science,
Yes.
just as therapy is an art science.
Right.
So we are here to bring to you today some information about addiction, codependency, trauma, and the authentic true self. And we are going to talk a lot about that. We also want to let you know that we do come into the world as our authentic true selves. We learn how to let go of that and sort of start to shift into a less authentic self, which we call the codependent or adapted or false self. And but we come in as our authentic true self, and we come in with a lot of different good qualities. We come in being very open to learning. We come in very curious about the world. We come in honest. Yes, we do. We are honest when we come in. We don't hide anything. We just express what we see and think and feel. And we learn to do less of that sometimes as we go on.
Yes, children. When we look at children, they are not shy, to cry when they need something.
Exactly.
That's as honest as anybody can get.
Exactly. I want that, and I want it now. We all come in as sexual beings. Unfortunately, we learn to hide and repress that authentic part of ourselves, but it's really something that we don't have to repress. It's something that we can share with the world, because the world is all the same as us. Everybody comes in sexual. And we come in trusting that the world is going to respond to our needs. And then, of course, when the world does, we feel great and we get to shine. And when the world doesn't treat us in a loving way, then we start to withdraw or become angry and find all sorts of ways of coping with it. But survival is top priority, so we let go of our authentic true selves in order to cope with the environment that we're in and survive. And most of us do.
Exactly.
So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we come in with a lot of different qualities. We come in able to be emotionally connected with others. We come in with the ability to be confident. And we also come in with the ability to be compassionate, which is something that I believe is a godlike quality, is compassion, feeling what other people are feeling, and recognizing that there but for the grace of God go I.
Yes. Yes, I mentioned something very interesting, and that's that you said that you are many things, and among them you're a psychotherapist.
Correct.
Right. And this is a concept that majority of us may not be able to even pay attention to, or to even have a value for it.
Mm-hmm.
The minute we are born, we are somebody's son or somebody's daughter. We are somebody's sister or brother. We are somebody's grandkid, right? We are somebody's niece and nephew. And we don't pay attention to that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
But those are, the gifts that upon arrival we are receiving,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And then as we grow up, we become parent. We become, the flag holder of the next generation that we are creating because of our existence, right? And those are, gifts of life.
Yes.
And but through the process of losing our authentic true self, we don't pay attention to those qualities.
Mhm.
We look at who I become as a professional. How much do I own financially? What people think of me?
Mhm. Mhm.
So we become attached, and we become kind of addicted to concepts that they are external from us,
Mhm.
to the point that we forget who we are actually,
Right. Right.
And those are the titles, those are the concepts in life that nobody can take away from us. Nobody can take away me being a mom. Nobody
Mhm.
can take away from you that you're a father and you're a grandfather,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That you're somebody's uncle, that you're somebody's niece, that you're somebody's friend.
Yes.
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 And these are the essence of life
Uh-huh.
that we don't pay attention to.
Uh-huh. Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah, so and the reason we don't pay attention to it is because we start to get influenced,
Right.
and we get influenced most powerfully by our primary caretakers, in many cases, in most cases, our parents. And when we get influenced, we begin to look at the world through their eyes, not
Right.
through our own eyes.
Right.
And to the extent that we do that is to the extent that we begin to lose our own wonder and our own ability to see the world as we see it, which is a unique vision. Nobody sees the world just the way we see it.
Right.
And so if our parents are wise and loving, they celebrate our uniqueness. And if our parents haven't learned to be wise and loving, then they try to impose upon us their own belief systems as though their belief systems are the right ones or the only ones. And when those get imposed upon us, we begin to lose connection with our authentic true selves.
Right. We learn to pretty much quantify life for us,
Mm-hmm.
versus looking at the qualities that exist among us and between us.
Yes.
Right. And we just forget about it. I mean, which is sad. I think, this is something that I wanted to say this for such a long time, and I just never came up. And
Mm-hmm.
thank you today for giving me the opportunity by saying that you are many things, and one of them is a psychotherapist, right?
Yes.
And that's true. We are many things.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we can understand that and appreciate that and know what we are, not in a quantified format,
Mm-hmm.
nobody can take away from us.
Right.
It's the quantity that we can lose, not the quality.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And so, yeah, when I say that we are many things, you're talking about playing many roles.
Playing many roles.
Yes, we play many roles.
Yeah.
But of course, we are not limited to just being the role that we play.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
We are more than that.
Yeah.
And so today we're going to talk more about the ego and the spirit, because the codependence, which is, and people are saying, okay, well, I tuned in to find out about addictions, and we have said in previous shows that codependency is probably the most prevalent and the most overlooked and undiagnosed addiction in our society. And what do we mean by that? What that means, what we say when we talk about codependence, is that we are addicted to how other people view us, and we are addicted to getting other people's approval, and we are addicted to looking at ourselves through other people's eyes. And when we do that, it's easy to lose touch and awareness of our own uniqueness and our own ability to make our own way in the world by making decisions that are right for us, which may not be popular with other people. So, for example, my parents, they had a lot of flaws and they injured me, but they also had a lot of positive things that they taught me. And one of the things that they did, which was good, was they taught me that I'm not married to an idea, that I can change my mind about things. And so I've changed my mind a number of times in terms of my career.
That's so scary.
Well, this last career, I don't feel like I'm going to change, because I feel like this is my authentic, true self that's working through it. But before this, I was a salesman. I was a business owner. I did a number of different things. I worked for other people. I worked for myself, and none of those things were me. I almost was a lawyer. I went to law school for 2 years, and people go,
that I cannot see about you.
and at that point, I was really trying to find myself. But my parents were good in that they supported me. They supported me emotionally. They even helped me financially to do what I wanted to do. And so when I opened up my own business, they helped me with that. And when I decided I didn't want to do that, they were supportive. When I went to law school, even though they helped me through law school, at the end of 2 years, and everybody, not my parents, but everybody else said, hey, you've got 1 more year to go. Why not get your law degree? And I said, I've already learned what I needed to learn. I've learned a lot about law. I said, that may come in handy someday. I said, but I've also learned that I don't want to practice. And so I said, I don't need to continue and get my degree just to say that I did. So that's what we need to know, is that we're not married to something that we've decided, that we're able to change our minds. And some people say, if I give my word to somebody, my word is my bond. And I say, absolutely, your word is your bond. However, you're also allowed to change your mind. And if you give your word to somebody and then you rethink it and you say to yourself, that really doesn't feel like me. It doesn't feel like something I really want to be doing and am committed to doing. I can talk to the person about it and say, listen, I gave you my word, but now I'm really changing my mind. And people go, how can you do that? How can you do that? I say, you do that because your authentic, true self is growing. And when you get new information, and you stick with the old and you stick with the old decision, you're not being true to yourself. And that's the most important thing. So we'll talk more about that as we come back from our break, and hopefully we will get some calls. We're hoping that you guys will call us. We will give you a free 15-minute consultation if you do. First caller, 951-922-3532. See you soon.
After our break. Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Heart-to-Heart program at KMET 1490 AM, ABC News Radio. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert here, and we are talking about codependency, addictions, and trauma impacting relationships this morning. And we just briefly introduced the topic in previous section of the program. We would like to invite you to please contact us 951-922-3532. If you're the fourth caller, you're going to get 15 minutes of free consultation with either myself or with Dr. Jaffe offline. And then that's the service that we are providing to you. And thank you for sharing your morning with us. Dr. Jaffe, you were talking about authentic true self as part of codependency that can be pretty much how codependency, impacts who we are.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So where I left off, and this is and I think what I'm saying is controversial, but this is what I truly believe, is that we need not be married to an idea. That what we are married to, if anything, is being our loving, authentic, true self, and that can't be negotiable. That we have to be who we are. And that means accepting ourselves. And if we are in a relationship, friendship, love relationship, and it's not working, and we've made a commitment to be with that person, that we do everything that we possibly can, as long as we feel like things are progressing. If the other person at some point stops doing their part of the relationship, or we start to feel like we're not growing in the relationship, we need to be able to talk about it. And if that talk goes on, and we have a number of talks, and that talk turns out that we feel like it's not working for us, we don't need to be married to the idea. So that, and I started to get clear about this when I went through my first divorce, because it was not something that I wanted. It was something that my first wife chose, and I was devastated. And I had thought of, like most of us do when we get married, it's for life. And then I realized, oh, it's not for life. It's really until somebody changes their mind. And so I've kind of kept that as my newer awareness, that although we want to make it work, and we don't want to have to start over, and we don't want to let go of the dream that we have when we get married, that it only works as long as both people are in agreement that it's working. And so that has led me to my now belief that what we need to do is be true to ourselves at all times. And so what we have in addiction is a belief that that not only do we not have to be true to ourselves, we have to be true to some other idea or principle, such as money is the most important thing, such as reputation is the most important thing. And so when we start focusing on that, then we lose touch with our loving, authentic, true self, because the real most important thing is our lovingness of ourselves and the people around us.
Right. It's just that, when it comes to codependency, the first important point to me is the awareness that one is becoming codependent, or it already is a codependent.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, we know that a person is not able to recognize that on their own. However, they feel the discomfort, they feel the unhappiness, they feel the pressure, and they also feel like there is no way out of it, or they don't know how to do it, or who to talk to. And for those who recognize that they have a concept or the belief or the approach or the way of life of codependence, that those are the people that they can actually go through the process of changing mind that you said.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they need to take a look at their belief system, their attitude. And the reason I'm saying belief system and attitude, because that's where it starts. It's our perceptions, it's our beliefs, it's our attitude that ultimately leads into our behavior and choice of behavior. And if the codependency is a concept that starts from the beliefs, it starts in perception. And when we get to that point, that what's happening to one person in his or her life, and is not appealing, is not healthy, is not making progress, It's not getting them to the point of for them to feel free and to feel their authentic true self and therefore happy. That's the time that a person, needs to permit himself or herself to make a change in their environment, in their approaches, in their lifestyle, in their communication, in their connection with others. And when that happens and the person, starts to feel have an understanding of how they got to the point of becoming a codependent and how they can change that, that's to me when actually, life as a authentic true self begins.
Yes. So now this show is also about addictions and trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about codependence as being the most overlooked addiction, and it's pretty endemic in our society. That doesn't mean that everybody suffers with it, but I think the majority of people do. So, and how can you tell if you're codependent? How codependence has a lot to do with how happy you are, right? When you're in your authentic true self, you feel like you're growing. Your authentic true self is curious. Your authentic true self wants to create more love in the world, and you're part of the world, so you want to create more love within yourself and within the world. And it doesn't matter what you're doing for a living, because you can do it with love in your heart, or you can do it just like a robot, right? Or you can do it with resentment. And if you're doing it like a robot, or you're doing it with resentment, then you probably are not accessing your authentic true self enough. I'm not saying you're not accessing it at all, but you're not accessing it enough. Let's talk about trauma for a moment. How do we get to be codependent? So within the last, 10, 15 years, psychologists have been doing research on trauma, and we have now distinguished two types of trauma. One we call the large T trauma, and the other we call the small T trauma. So the large T traumas are that which most adults in our society would say, yes, that's traumatizing. What would that be? That would be any kind of physical assault. That would be any kind of sexual assault. That would be any kind of
natural disaster.
That would be robbery. That would be
loss of job, car accident,
yes,
divorce, death in the family.
Exactly. Those would be, thank you, those would be large T traumas. And so people go, okay, those are traumas. People don't really understand how traumas affect us, but they do understand that they do affect us, and it's not in a positive way. What we've come up with in the last, let's say, 15 years is the idea that there's a lot of traumas that go on in life, and the most notable traumas and the most deadly traumas are those which happen to us when we are children, because as children, our brains are not formed fully yet, and we process things differently than we do as adults. Now, that's not to say that adults can't be traumatized with the small T traumas as well as children, but with children, it's usually worse, because the child doesn't have the wherewithal to be able to understand what's happening. And what are some of the small T traumas as a child? Anytime a child is treated unfairly, especially by a parent, because the parent is God to the child. I'm talking about young children, but even as the children gets to be 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, they're still not capable of going out in the world and fending for themselves. So they look up to the parent, and the parent and the parent's position with the child is that the parent is charged with the child's best interest and welfare. And so the child has to believe that the parent is acting in their best interest, even when evidence suggests that they're not. Because for the child to think that they are under the control of people who don't have their best interest at heart is too much for the child to handle.
Right, and then we see that these approaches in how parents may raise their child in a codependent way that leads into codependency, I should say. There are cultural factors that involves too, right?
Right.
Every culture, they treat their infant, they treat their, toddler, they treat their young kids, in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there is a concept of that, there is a different level of attention in certain cultures to boys versus girls.
Correct.
Right. And so, and how that plays out in a child's life as part of their learning process can create, devastating long-term impact on their lives.
Right. You were talking before, maybe you can share a little bit of your background, because you were talking before about how boys and girls were treated differently at school in terms of athletics, and maybe you can comment on that.
Right. For example, certain sport activities, they were strictly for boys, like playing football, and I'm talking about football, soccer. I'm not talking about American football.
Right.
Or, diving, for example, horseback riding, these were kind of sports that they belong to boys, and or activities that they required, more of a physical attention
mm-hmm.
than, anything else. But for girls, soft exercises, things that they didn't require much of a physical, involvement.
So what were girls allowed to do and what were boys allowed to do?
Like walking, right?
Girls were allowed to walk.
Right. Or, soft gymnastic, activities. Volleyball,
mm-hmm.
was the appropriate play for girls. And of course, learning about how to be a good homemaker,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So these are actually, practices that they were taught at the schools in different cultures. And so we see that from early on, a girl learns how to be a girl, a boys learn how to be a boy,
mm-hmm.
in a aggressive way or in a soft way,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And but that's not who the children are.
You were
right?
You were also saying like you were at school and you saw that boys had all of this great ability to go out and maybe play handball or get
right.
on the high bar, and
right.
and girls had what, like a hopscotch
exactly.
thing,
yes.
and that was it.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
right. So and when we look at the root of that, we see for girls the idea of maintaining their virginity until they get married.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the belief that a girl plays football, for example, they may lose their virginity, or if they do horseback riding, they could
mm-hmm.
lose their
mm-hmm.
virginity.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore the concept of fear that's being generated and maintained among girls, for those reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine how much, it takes away from feeling good about themselves as a female. So they become all about their vagina. They become all about their virginity.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know, that's such a trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a trauma to make a female fearful. Right. That if they are not virgin at the time of a marriage, what can happen?
So that would be one example of a small t trauma.
So that's a constant training.
And yes.
Until they get married.
Yes.
Right. And then
yes.
the same training applies to boys. That
right.
your bride must be a virgin.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. So these are all ideas, philosophies, way of life that takes children away from their authenticity, and they become busy and they start to believe these external factors that they are only imposed on them.
Right.
And how and at what severity and at what interval these informations, these beliefs are kind of imposed on our youngster,
mm-hmm.
right? It causes more codependency, more trauma, or less codependency and less trauma.
Right.
But ultimately, it's taking them away from who they are as loving, authentic people, that they can have their own ideas, they can live by their own belief system, And of course, I'm not suggesting that societal rules need to be disobeyed because somebody wants to have their own belief. No, we all follow a shared concept of law and ethics. But then again, personal beliefs are not supposed to be tarnished that way.
Right. And so yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit more after the break about what small t traumas do to us and how they create codependency. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about what you can do if you feel like you are codependent or in a codependent relationship, and how you can allow yourself to move toward your authentic true self. And if your partner, and if you change, there's a pretty fair chance if your partner wants to stay in relationship with you, they will shift with you.
So they negotiate.
There we go. And we will talk about that after our break.
Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Heart-to-Heart program at KMET 1490 ABC News Radio. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert here on the topic of codependency, small t, large t trauma, and addictions impacting our relationships.
Right. So we started to talk before the break about large t traumas, and now we're talking about small t traumas. And when it happens in childhood, it being even more affecting the person, and can really affect the person because we carry those in our subconscious, and it affects how we think about ourselves and how we think about other people, the opposite sex, and how we think about our relationship with the world. So we were talking before about small t traumas, one of them being girls being treated differently and lesser than boys. And that's just one example of a small t trauma. But the other example, there are many examples, and the reason that it took the psychology profession so long to come up with the idea of small t traumas is that because they are so ubiquitous within our culture, that people just thought of it as normal.
It's like it's normal to bully a child. It's normal. Oh, you're gonna get over it.
Yeah, exactly.
But the children, they don't get over it. For children, every incident in life, it's a matter of life.
People, the child is learning from how they're treated, and also observing us as parents on how we are treating them and how we treat each other. And so even though the child, quote, gets over it, meaning that they consciously move on to the next thing, it doesn't mean that what we have just done a minute or a year ago isn't still affecting them. It was very interesting. My son is adopted, and we got him at birth. And at about 3 years old, about 2.5, 3 years old, his birth mother came into town, and we had told him that he was adopted, but we didn't tell him that he was going to meet his birth mother. We didn't think he was ready for that. So we just told him that we were going to introduce him to a friend of ours, Linda. And so as soon as he met Linda, he had been in a really bad mood the whole day. And as soon as he met her, his mood changed. And he didn't know who she was. He thought that she was just a friend of ours. But his mood changed into a very, very relaxed, calm mood. And so there was a connection between them. And they spent a few hours together, and then Linda left. And then we didn't really talk about it at all, like for the next maybe 5 or 6 years. So he was like about, let's say, 3, and at 8 years old, he did ask, and he said, who was my birth mother? And I said her name was, and I gave her first and last name. I had just introduced him as Linda before, but I said Linda, and I gave the last name. And he said, Linda, and he goes, Linda, was that the woman that I met a long time ago? And he was like 2.5, 3 years old, and he remembered it at 8 years old. So never let it be thought that we don't have a memory of it, even though consciously we're not thinking about it. It's still lodged in our subconscious mind, and we still have impressions. So what are some of the other ways in which we are traumatized with small t traumas? One common way is through yelling.
Mm-hmm.
When we yell at a child, we are telling the child that they are bad.
Name calling.
Or name calling, even yelling or name calling, or worse yet, yelling with name calling. And so what we're doing is we're confusing the particular piece of behavior that we're observing with who the child is. And the child then is going to internalize who they are with the tone of voice that we're giving them.
And then comparing is another one.
And comparing one person with another. I wish you were more like Susie, or I wish you were more like this. Those are other common ways that we have, but we that we give small t traumas to the child. And so what I want to say about that is,
now before we go there, I like to say this example. When parents, compare their children with each other, they say, "You're just like your mother. You never listen.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like your father. You're so careless."
Mm-hmm.
So those are, examples of a small t trauma, and then people don't realize that how traumatized a child actually becomes, and because of their codependent role that's already, in process of being established, they don't say anything.
Right. So for that's a great example. And so if let's say the child was given the message, you're just like your father, you never listen, they may internalize that message, and it may come up with them later in life where they feel as though they're not really hearing what the other person is saying, or they're not understanding what the other person is saying, which may cause them to ask the other person to please repeat it, or to say, "I'm not quite sure I get it," or to start apologizing and saying, I'm really sorry, but I don't really understand what you're saying. Could you say it again?
Or they may actually go the opposite way, and they say, "Well, I'm not supposed to listen. It's not important." And then they actually don't hear what their partner is
because
saying.
They've been given that injunction that they don't, so that they don't feel like they can.
Yeah, they can, or it's okay if their father didn't do it.
Right.
So it's okay for them not to do it.
Exactly.
Also.
Yes.
Right. So it becomes some sort of grandiose, or some sort of narcissistic, or some sort of "I'm entitled not to listen."
Right. And so these are some of the things, and so that they become what we are calling the false self, because they're ideas about ourselves that are somebody else's ideas. And so when we're children, we're looking to somebody else to tell us who we are. And what we need is a parent or parents who say, "Who you are is precious." So what your behavior in certain instances is not something that we want to encourage, and we want to give the child good reasons why the behavior isn't encouraged. And we come from a background in our society where the old adage, "spare the rod and spoil the child," is still in existence today. So we believe that that discipline means punishment. And actually the word discipline comes from the Greek word disciple, which means simply to follow the lead of the leader. And if the leader is showing you compassion, love, understanding, and an explanation, then you as his disciple follow that, and you become curious, and you become open, and you become loving, and that's what discipline is. So I never hit, and I don't believe I yelled, or if I did, I didn't do it very much with either of my two children, and they turned out very, very well. Because what I did was I separated the behavior from who they were. And I said, what is this behavior that you're doing, and what's the purpose of it? Why are you doing it that way? And then I would have a discussion with them. And on occasion, they would explain to me why they're doing it, and I would say, oh, well, then that makes sense, and I understand, and I wouldn't have anything more to say about it. So even though it may not be my way, it was their way, and their way wasn't a bad way. So as parents, it's important for us to help the child to discover that they have their own ways of looking at things and doing things that may be different from us, but may be actually an improvement, and we can learn from them. But it's not, so that the authoritarian approach to child rearing is more and more becoming something of in the distance. However, the authoritarian approach, which is still pretty endemic in our world and in our society, it causes us to lose touch with who we really are, and that our brain and our authentic true self are valuable and important to connect with and to exhibit in the world.
Exactly. So we have a few short minutes, and we promised to say something about couples and codependency.
Yes, yes. So what we find with couples is that when people are in codependent relationships, they're so afraid of hurting the other person, or they don't treat the other person respectfully. It can be one or the other. But I'm going to talk now, because we only do have a few minutes, about being afraid of hurting the other person, because that's very, very common. And so as a result of being afraid of hurting the other person, we hold back our truth. We don't say what we really think and feel and believe. And we say, I don't want to hurt them, and that's our rationalization.
Mm-hmm.
And when I use the word rationalization as a therapist, I separate it out, and I say to my clients, I say, rationalize is actually two words. It's rational lies.
Right.
So it's things that make sense to our thinking brain. Yes, I don't want to hurt them, and yes, therefore I don't want to say it. But it's also a lie, because in doing that, we're not just protecting them, we're protecting ourselves from them getting upset with us. And you and I were just talking about how important the truth is to be told in relationships. And I was actually having that discussion with a client the other day, and I think it's important for us to recognize that by withholding the truth, we may get a temporary feeling of, oh, everything is good because nobody is upset. But what we don't get is to a deeper understanding of each other. And the thing that kills relationships the most is lack of growth. So when we don't want to step on toes, we keep ourselves from learning about what we really want and need, and what goes on inside of the other person. And it's okay to feel passionate about things as long as we are not abusive. So we don't have to actually argue about who's right and wrong. We simply have to express our feelings strongly, without saying my feelings are more important than yours, but my feelings are important. And I want to hear your feelings, and here are my feelings. So I'd like your input on this too, about other people withholding the truth and trying to protect the other person.
Well, withholding the truth is not just for protecting the other person, it's also protecting themselves,
Right.
There are people that, they don't want to lose their relationship at all cost,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't believe in themselves, and they think that by walking away from the relationship, that's pretty much, loss of many things in their lives.
Right.
And therefore, for that reason, and not believing in themselves that they have the ability to be, self-sufficient, and they can find other relationships, or that they are, good enough for who they are and all of that, and plus many more details, which I wish we had more time to talk about it. But therefore, they prefer to stay within a relationship that's unhappy to them and is unhappy to their partner. And sometimes they bring up children if they have any, for the sake of children. So these are some of the common, reasons we hear in couple therapy about why people stay in unhappy relationships. Finance is a big issue, right? Health coverage is a big issue. However, when we look at deeper, scenarios, we see that, creating a life that's unhappy for oneself and for their partner and for their children. It's actually, living in a trauma, a multi-trauma every day.
Yes, it is. That's a very good point.
Yeah. And it stops our creativity, it stops our physical health, it stops, or impacts, our individual growth, and it's just an unhappy life. So we need to be aware of how we are continuing carrying and creating and recreating small traumas in our lives for the sake of and not wanting to look at our own authentic true self as a growth process.
Exactly. And so, we only have a few more seconds, so I'm just going to end by saying this is not the only time we're going to be talking about this.
Right.
We encourage you to get the book that I say is the Bible of codependency. It's called Codependence: Healing the Human Condition by Charles Whitfield. And we want to let you know that we are here, and you can look us up online. You can communicate with us, and we want you to have access to your loving, authentic, true self, because the happier you are, the more happiness you bring into your relationships, the more you bring into your relationships with your children, and the happier you make yourself and the world.
Yes. So with that, until next Thursday at 3 p.m. and next Friday at 9 a.m., we wish you all the love in life. Be safe, and don't forget, all you need is actually love.
Love, love, love.
Have a wonderful morning.
Views and claims expressed are those of the program producer and are not endorsed by this station. Opinions expressed are not necessarily those of radio station KMET, its management, employees, or affiliates.
KMET, Banning, Beaumont, Redlands, and Palm Springs.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. A new ABC News Ipsos poll